I'm Bo Johnson. I'd like to share with you today an American tragedy. George Norris did everything right. He worked his entire life, raised a family, honored God, and when retirement finally arrived, he did what Americans are told they have earned the right to do. He lived quietly. In Texas, George Norris settled into a peaceful rhythm with his wife. The grind of daily obligation faded, time slowed, and life finally belonged to him again. Like many men released from decades of work, George returned to a passion that brought him joy: orchids. Not drugs, not weapons, not schemes. Flowers. Rare, delicate, beautiful orchids. He studied them, cultivated them, learned their histories and varieties. And over time, his knowledge grew into a small home-based business. He purchased orchids from established overseas suppliers, nurtured them, and sold them to fellow hobbyists. His life was honest, transparent, and good. Then one day, without warning, without explanation, Norris's door exploded. Armed federal agents from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, those who protect Bambi in the forest, stormed into his living room. They were hunting. They were hunting for violent criminals. Weapons were drawn, voices were raised. George and his wife were subdued, their papers seized, their possessions rifled through, their dignity stripped away. When his wife asked why this was happening, she was told, "You don't need to know. You can't know." In that moment, George Norris's retirement ended, and a quiet American life was swallowed by the machinery of corrupt federal power. The government claimed that George Norris had bought and sold illegal orchids. That claim was false. Even the prosecution knew it was false. The alleged violation was nothing more than a paperwork failure. A foreign supplier failed to include proper import documentation with a shipment. There was no contraband knowingly trafficked, no endangered species intentionally sold, no deception, no intent, no victim, and no harm. At most, it was an administrative irregularity. But the government did not treat it as civil. It treated it as criminal. And once a man is labeled a criminal, truth no longer controls the outcome. Procedure does. The investigation was never objective. Agents did not ask whether a crime had occurred. They worked backward from the assumption that one must exist. Evidence was gathered not to discover truth, but to support a predetermined conclusion, the theory of prosecution. George Norris was treated as guilty from the outset, and the facts were shaped to fit the charge. This violated the most basic principle of justice. Investigations exist to uncover truth, not to manufacture lies. The prosecutor knew George Norris did not sell illegal orchids and pressed forward anyway. This was not the pursuit of justice. It was the pursuit of a criminal conviction. Prosecutors are rewarded for outcomes, not restraint. And once codes can be bent to secure a result, conscience becomes irrelevant. George Norris ceased to be a man in the eyes of the system. He became a file, a statistic, a problem to be processed. In theory, the defense lawyer is supposed to stand between the citizen and the full weight of the state or the federal government. In reality, that line collapsed quietly. George Norris's initial counsel lacked the knowledge and posture required to confront a federal prosecution rooted in regulatory overreach. More importantly, the defense failed to ask the one question that matters in every criminal case: where is the crime? Instead of challenging the legitimacy of the prosecution, the defense accepted the government's framing and moved inside the system designed to convict. Once that premise was accepted, the outcome was inevitable. Defense lawyers are conditioned to survive within the system, not to confront its moral collapse. They know the conviction rates, the penalties for losing, and the consequences of challenging jurisdiction, intent, and foundation. So when faced with an elderly, exhausted, and terrified client, they offer what they believe is mercy, a plea. But a plea is not justice. It is surrender under duress. The defense did not force the prosecutor to prove criminal intent, did not force the judge to confront the absence of harm, and did not insist that a jury hear the full truth. Silence became consent, and procedure became collaboration. The jury never received the full story. They were not told that the violation was clerical, that the supplier caused it, that no intent existed, and that no life, liberty, or property was harmed. The grand jury failed to act as a shield and instead became a conveyor belt. The judge allowed a case with no criminal foundation to proceed. A judge is not a spectator. A judge is the final gatekeeper between federal power and individual liberty. The gate was left open, wide open. George Norris was forced to choose between risking everything at trial or accepting a plea to survive. Regrettably, or maybe fortunately, he accepted the plea, not because he was guilty, but because the system made innocence too dangerous. He was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison for flowers, for trusting a system that no longer distinguishes between wrongdoing and noncompliance. This case was not a mistake. It was a prosecution inside a morally bankrupt system. Investigators abandoned objectivity. Prosecutors abandoned conscience. Defense counsel abandoned confrontation. Grand juries abandoned their purpose. Judges abandoned oversight. And when criminal law is used to enforce administrative compliance, liberty and freedom die quietly behind procedure, titles, and armed men who believe obedience is justice. George Norris knew he was innocent. The only remaining question is whether the rest of us will learn anything from what was done to him, because if this can happen over orchids, it can happen to anyone for anything. The Liberty Dialogues hold that law exists to protect life, liberty, and property, not to manufacture crimes from paperwork. The Norris case violated truth at every level. There was no harm, no intent, and no victim. Yet the system converted regulation into felony, procedure into justice, and an innocent man into a criminal. When truth is replaced by compliance and conscience by code, the law ceases to be law and becomes a weapon. Get your report that discusses the Liberty Dialogues and ChatGPT's agreement that this book series reflects the foundation of truth concerning jurisdiction. The cost is only $1, and the abundance received is peace of mind. Go to jamesbowersjohnson.com and get your copy today. And as always, may truth reign supreme.